Hello and welcome to another historic video. Today we're just checking out this green +1 counter deck since I wanted to play with Arcbound Ravager, and for those that aren't familiar, hopefully this video will be enlightening, because Arcbound Ravager used to be a menace 20 years ago and it's still incredibly powerful today, especially when paired with these hardened scales effects. We've got the classic 1 mana enchantment that enhances the number of +1 counters we get, as well as now Michelangelo as a 2-drop with the same ability that also enters with a mutagen token. So that's an artifact we can maybe sacrifice to our various artifact synergies, and the one of Ozolith, since it is also a legendary, so we don't necessarily want to draw multiples, but all these effects enhance the number of +1 counters we get, which in turn plays very well with a Ravager, which has modular, so it enters with 1 +1 counter, can maybe be enhanced by those hardened scales, and then we can also sacrifice an artifact at will to put a +1 counter on it, which can also be enhanced by the scales effect, and then the Ravager can also sacrifice itself to its own ability, meaning now with modular we get to move all of the counters from the Ravager onto another artifact creature, and that's how we can potentially set up a one-hit KO if we move all those counters onto a Inkmoth Nexus, for instance, which only needs to attack for 10 power to poison the opponent to death in a single attack. So despite being a land, this is actually one of our primary win conditions as a flying artifact land with Infect. And then rounding out the deck, we have a bunch more of these artifact creatures that play well with +1 counters. Patchwork Automaton, whenever we cast an artifact spell, picks up a +1 counter, has a bit of built-in protection with Ward. Steel Overseer, one of the main payoffs, which can tap to put a +1 counter on each artifact creature we control. And Hangerback Walker, when it dies, will leave behind Thopter tokens equal to the number of counters on it, so the more counters the better, and can also activate it each turn to add more counters onto it. And then we also have a couple 1 and 0 drops. Ornithopter, especially powerful when paired with Springleaf Drum, allowing us to quickly empty out our hand. And then Zabaz is another modular creature that can move its counters onto another artifact creature when it dies, can even enhance the amount of modular counters, although that's rarely relevant unless we maybe draw multiple Ravagers. And then Zabaz can also destroy other artifacts we control, which can be a way of pseudo-sacrificing them to maybe move their counters around. If it comes to an Iron Apprentice, for instance, which when it dies moves all of its +1 counters onto another creature, then now with Zabaz we can maybe move the counters from Apprentice onto an Inkmoth to still maybe set up the poison kill. And then we've got some more non-creature spells. We mentioned Springleaf Drum. The Ozolith can also be very nice if we have a sacrifice outlet, as we can sack a bunch of creatures that have counters on them. The counters end up maybe with modular onto our creatures and then also onto Ozolith, which can once again move them onto another creature, each time enhancing them with our Hardened Scales effect. And then we also have some main deck Graveyard Hate, although Agatha's Soul Cauldron is still incredibly synergistic even without facing other graveyard decks, as we can maybe exile creatures from our own graveyard to get more +1 counters, and then we can also grant those exiled creatures' abilities to the rest of the team, so we can maybe exile a Steel Overseer, and now all our creatures that have counters on them can tap to put a +1 counter on artifact creatures. Can also be great with Arcbound Ravager if we just need a sack outlet, although we will be missing out on the modular perhaps. And then we also have a one-off The Ooze, which can also exile a card from a graveyard each turn, giving us a mutagen token in return, which we can maybe sacrifice for free to the Ravager, or we can spend 1 mana to sacrifice it and get a +1 counter. And when a creature with +1 counters on it dies on our side, we also get a number of mutagen tokens equal to that amount, so that's also very powerful, similar to the Ozolith, where we can maybe sacrifice some large creatures with a lot of +1 counters, and then get even more counters in return when Arcbound Ravager is involved. And then the mana base does have access to all the artifact lands, so that makes this mana base a little bit more powerful than maybe the modern variant of this archetype. But of course in modern you also have a few cards that aren't available on Arena, thinking of Walking Ballista and Ancient Stirrings, which can make the deck a lot more consistent. And of course modern also allows Mox Opal, which is banned in Historic but available in Timeless, so that's another major difference. But we do get to run the artifact lands, going for Great Furnace and Tree of Tales. The green one is a no-brainer. Ended up switching away from Darksteel Citadel to the Great Furnace because I did end up losing a game where I wasn't able to activate my Zabaz, since I only had 1 life to spare and Spire of Industry wouldn't do it. So then, having the red artifact land can occasionally come in handy to destroy your own artifacts with Zabaz. And then the Indestructible can also, of course, matter, so that's the main difference. And then also the one of Bosteiju, in case we need to blow up some artifacts or enchantments. Phyrexian Tower can also function as a sack black outlet if we don't have another one, maybe give us an extra mana, of course the full set of Inkmoth Nexus, and then Spire of Industry can also make a green once we have an artifact in play, which shouldn't be a problem, and can then also activate Zabaz's various abilities, but we can also fix our colors with a Springleaf Drum. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with what looks like a functional hand. Not the most amazing. Could be a little slow, but at least with the Ozolith it's a bit more resilient. Facing blue-green. Make that Merfolk. Okay, so we do have to watch out for Harbinger, turning all lands into islands. So this might be my last opportunity to play Michelangelo. Although I really want to get to Overseer down first. But yeah, my gut's telling me get this down while I can. And then I guess Ornithopter could maybe block. Okay, I guess there is the Lord that they can flash in. So then no blocks. And our opponent keeps up what could be a counter spell for non-creatures, hopefully. I'll try the Overseer. And then I could still sack the Mutagen. I think I'll hang on to it for now. Although, putting a counter on Ornithopter could maybe let it block pretty well. Okay. No attacks. Opponent's got the Hexcatcher. Did not catch us off guard. Alright, and Ravager was excellent. So first, try another Overseer. And then for now, I think Hangerback, unless Ravager could already present lethal, although that would be pretty unlikely. Opponent also has mana up, so we have to watch out for interaction. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised actually if Ravager can present lethal with 4 artifact lands and an Ozolith to move counters onto Ornithopter. But I'll respect some more interaction this turn. We're not under a ton of pressure, so I think we have time to set up. I'm just gonna chill. Opponent did nothing that turn, so maybe their hand's just a bunch of Force of Negations, which is recently illegal in Historic. I see Tidebinder, they wanted to counter the Overseer trigger. Fair enough. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I can just go for it now. Playing another Overseer versus Activate Hangerback is both fine. So let's see here. Activate Hangerback. Activate Overseer after I sack the Hangerback, since we'll get more mileage out of the Ozolith. And this is where going full control is worth it, since we'll be able to sack things more easily. And I'm gonna sack all my artifact lands just because. Make sure not to sack the Ozolith. Resolve all those triggers. Sack Ravager to itself. Modular onto Ornithopter. And then Ozolith gets 42 counters. And that's 74 damage in the air. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. Turn 1, Springleaf into Ornithopter into Zabas. Turn 2, Overseer, and then we've got our Ozolith as our Hardened Scales effect. I'll take a Ravager. I'll take something like a Hangerback Walker would be fine. More Hardened Scales effects. Alright, so we'll stick to the plan. And then in a pinch, Zabas can also function as a weird sacrifice outlet where we can destroy our own artifacts. Although right now wouldn't be very useful. Opponent on a graveyard combo deck. Don't have one of our graveyard hate artifacts in hand. Got 3 total in the deck with 2 Cauldrons and the Ooze. And Atraxa in the graveyard. So this turn, stick to the plan, go for Overseer, and we can play an Apprentice as well. They did get rid of a Spell Snare, so they could have another one in hand to maybe counter an Ozolith. It's going to be another looting. Discarding Saint Elenda. Another legendary creature. Okay, so we'll try Ozolith, I guess. Seems to have the highest upside here. And see if they have a Spell Snare left. A Lightning Axe, Steel Overseer in response. So we still get to activate it at least. But now our clock is a lot slower. Can our opponent bring back Atraxa? Not yet. Goes digging with a looting. And Hardened Scales the draw. So what's my plan? Can play Hardened Scales. Could also activate Ozolith. Then I wouldn't be able to activate Zabaz. But then I would be attacking for a healthy amount. Versus can also go Scales plus Automaton, but that doesn't seem as good here. So we can certainly attack for lethal next turn. Question remains if our opponent can stabilize here with an Atraxa. Looks like they can. Or perhaps Saint Elenda. Although I do have multiple attackers and we can use Zabaz to blow things up. So it's possible I can still sneak through. Although opponent's probably disenchanting one of our Ozolith effects. Faith's Feathers on the Apprentice, gaining 4, making a 4/4. Alright, we did draw a Cauldron, although a little late here. So what's my plan exactly? I can attack with Ornithopter, and then use Zabaz to blow up the Apprentice. That's going to require red mana. I get to move 5, 6, 7 counters onto Ornithopter. And then Zabaz can destroy itself, and that should just be game. Alright, that looks good to me. I guess we can also just activate Ozolith, that's maybe a little easier. Alright, so no graveyard hate needed. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Yeah, we'll need to find a second land ideally. But we have Hardened Scales, we'll be able to enable the Spire to make green. And then Ravager, of course, our most important card. Facing a Lurrus deck, so it could be Auras. So definitely a matchup where Inkmoth would be great, since opponent could gain a lot of life. Turn 1 Springleaf. And we drew the land, so this turn I guess we go Hanger back into Hardened Scales, even though we miss out on the extra counter. We'll make up for it next turn. And then the goal is to grow Hanger back and at some point sacrifice it. Opponent does have Light Paw, so that's incredibly scary. So I can go for Arcbound, and then still tap the Hanger back if they try and remove it, and then maybe sack it in response. Yeah, I think I prefer that over Zabas plus Ozolith, which would be the alternative. But yeah, Light Paws can easily run away with the game here, since we don't have removal to punish it. That's where a Walking Ballista would be very useful. All that glitters, and then I'm sure opponent's gonna tutor up their removal. We'll see what they target. The Hanger back, so in response we can activate it and sacrifice it. And then if I don't want my opponent gaining life, I can chump with a Flyer and then still sack it to the Ravager. Opponent figuring out what's happening. I mean, I could technically also just eat a Light Paws. Maybe that's better, since I have another Ravager. So just sack a token, sack Ravager to itself. And then block. Alright, eat your Light Paws. And now with Ozolith and all those counters, it's not going to be too difficult to get things going again. So just get to empty my hand. Can I attack for lethal with her opponent at 26? I highly doubt it. Ooh, Surgical Extraction, the Ravager. Well, should have done that before I cast it. It doesn't remove the Ravagers on the stack. Yeah, I guess it could have backfired if they actually cast it in my draw step. So let's do some math. Sack token onto Ravager, make it a 4/4. I've got 2 artifact lands, Springleaf Drum, so that's another 6. Sack Zabaz. With modular moves 3 counters. I think we're a bit short, but it's definitely not by much. Because we also have the Ozolith moving the counters again. I really should do the math, but I kinda just want to go for it. And then sacking this versus sacking the 1/1 Thopter. I guess this is better because of Ozolith. I guess I also should have put modular onto Arcbound actually, since again Ozolith will give us more. Alright, so we had some damage to spare. Yeah, this deck is pretty wild when it comes to Arcbound Ravager with a Hardened Scales, so it's always worth just double checking if you don't have lethal. And in this case we had quite a bit of damage to spare. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play with a functional hand. Facing forests. plots, or rather suspend a crashing footfalls. Okay, so in a couple turns they'll get some 4/4 rhinos. Not sure if they're also going to cascade into them at some point. Inkmoth was a useful draw. So sequencing could start with Hardened Scales and then prioritize Automaton or Overseer next turn. And then Zabas will also pick up an extra counter. So yeah, opponent's probably cascading into their suspend cards. I think Overseer has a little bit more upside this turn. And could play another one or get the Automaton down. Let's go with Automaton into Zabaz. Opponent's gonna Quandrix Command, counter, bounce. So that's pretty effective. Do we wanna animate Inkmoth, activate Overseer? That's an option. Yeah, because playing an Apprentice here is not particularly exciting. So yeah, that set us back by 2 whole turns. Which gives the Rhinos time to set something up. So next turn they get to cast it. Their deck might also have Force of Negation, for instance. At least we can double spell now. And I think I just like double Steel Overseer. Hope they don't have another Quandrix Command. And then next turn with Michelangelo, we can do some damage. Yeah, Violent Outburst, cascading into another Footfalls. Can have a peek at the rest of their deck, but not for very long. So their opponent now has 16 power worth of Rhinos. Can a Ravager save me? I mean, just Michelangelo and then activate double Overseer is pretty good. Since we would be able to make some large blockers. Opponent's going to dismember for the Overseer. We'll activate a response. Play Zabaz. And a Borrower to bounce Overseer. Oh, I get to activate it here. And then Mutagen on Zabaz. So I'm technically not dead on board. Opponent goes digging. And yeah, next turn Inkmoth could present lethal if we activate Zabaz on the Apprentice, for instance. Because I would get to move 8 counters onto an already 3/3 Inkmoth. But if they have another Borrower to bounce a creature, Michelangelo would be forced to chump at least. Yeah, that's rough. Although, I'm not dead. Although, now I also don't have the colored mana to pay for Spire of Industry to activate Zabaz's red ability. So that's actually super relevant. Because yeah, otherwise I would have been able to animate Inkmoth, Zabaz on Apprentice, and then move 7 counters and attack for lethal poison. That's not going to work. So what's the alternative? Apprentice still holds off a Rhino, but now the Brazen Borrowers are also problematic. But I guess I just go Overseer Zabaz and then try to block. but I'm pretty sure they'll still have enough trample here if they attack all out. So yeah, if we had one more life, we would have gotten there. Block, block, block. Take 2 trample. GG's. Close one here against a pretty cool Cascade Rhinos deck. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. Got Inkmoth, multiple creatures that we can sack to Ravager. So we're angling for a poison kill. And I guess we don't need to play the Inkmoth just yet. Turn 1 Mystic. So if this is Green Devotion, we do have to watch out for Cavalier, which can maybe get in the way. Could also be mono green elves, where I don't expect many flying or reach creatures. Alright, their opponent's also trying to go wide. But yeah, I think we will have lethal next turn, if I'm not mistaken. Would help to draw Hardened Scales, but I think we'll be fine without it. Don't think they're attacking. Opponent also missing a few line drops, so not the most explosive start they could have had. They might still have a Chord of Calling in hand that they can cast for X = 1, but I don't think there's anything that they can grab that would really stop us. So let's do some math. Animate Inkmoth. I have 2 artifact lands. I can sack to the Ravager. Can still activate Walker, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So yeah, that's more than enough. Because the Apprentice counts double. Could also just play another hanger back, but it's kind of the same as just activating the one in play. So go to damage. And that's when we start sacking stuff. And then I could also move the counters onto the hanger back as opposed to directly onto Ravager or the Inkmoth. Sack all of my lands. Sack the hanger back. And then if I go full control, it's a little faster to sack things all at once. Alright, 11 counters. And there we go, awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. This hand really needs a second land, otherwise it would have all the pieces we need. Yeah, I don't think I can keep this. This one's a bit better. And then I think I like turn 1 Springleaf, turn 2 Automaton into Zabaz, and then gotta keep the Ravager, so hanger back can go. And then I wouldn't mind finding something like an Ozolith or the Ooze to be able to maybe move the counters from Automaton onto the Inkmoth eventually. So for now, Automaton into Zabaz. Still missing a Hardened Scales effect. Opponent on presumably the Graveyard combo deck. Did find the scales. So I should be pretty close to lethal here. Just gotta watch out for maybe an Izzet Charm dealing 2 damage. So let's say I play Hardened Scales, play Ravager. I guess I wouldn't be able to attack with the Ink Moth. So this is probably still more of a setup turn. Play Ravager. Attack for 5, but we're most likely going to win with poison. I don't think I have lethal if I move all in with a Ravager here. Especially with our opponent at 20. Even though I could animate Ink Moth, have 1, 2, 3, 4 artifacts I can sacrifice. Plus a modular, so that's 10 counters on Ravager. So move 13 counters, so I think we only have 17 damage here if I'm not mistaken. So a little bit short. I guess they do have a mana confluence, so possible putting them low is still worth it. But if they have some interaction here, then that line is pretty risky. Opponent did indeed have an Izzet Charm. Alright, gotta hope they can't reanimate some bomb. Alright, opponent getting an Agent of Treachery. Might still be able to beat that. Alright, so opponent's getting Agent back. Interested to see what they try and steal. The Ravager. Alright, so tap this for mana. Animate Ink Moth. And we'll start sacking. Sack Automaton. Ravager to itself. Put the counters on Ink Moth, next turn activate, and that's more than 10 poison next turn to win the game in 1 attack. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent enough looking hand. Turn 1 can start with Zabaz or play the Ozolith, so we're better equipped against removal. And then I can maybe play Zabaz once we have Michelangelo in play already. Still probably going with Overseer first, so we can activate it a turn sooner. Facing what's presumably the Graveyard combo deck. And then I can already run out Ornithopter to attack with next turn. Opponent does have the Fatal Push, so it might be something else. Blue-black midrange. Or ninjas. Okay, so how does that change our play? I think I still like Michelangelo Zabaz, or I can go Walker Zabaz. They just won't get the extra counters. So we've got plenty of blockers for their ninja. Hacker attacks. I'll block. I don't want them sneaking around. And then the Ozolith picks up more counters. With modular, Ornithopter now gets 3 counters. And another hacker. Backup Zabaz isn't bad. And I don't really see a reason to get too aggressive. Unless we maybe put counters on Michelangelo to attack with. I think we put them on the Walker. And then I can also use Zabaz to destroy the Walker to make a bunch of flyers if I want. Sure, maybe I can get in for 3 now. And yeah, our opponent's gonna scoop it up. No way they can get past this wall of creatures. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Although can't quite play Hardened Scales on turn 1. But that's alright. We'll be able to run it out next turn, or probably turn 3, alongside one of our 2-drops. Opponent also on artifacts, but a blue build instead. So those are good at going wide, which could be an issue if those tokens also have flying. But yeah, for now, play Automaton. And then next turn we can Hardened Scales plus Hanger back. Unless we maybe see a lethal line with Inkmoth Nexus. But yeah, now Tamio enables Mox Amber. I might see the warped 3-drop that can make 1/1 drones. Or a Foundry. Into Ornithopter, so they get to use Foundry to sack Ornithopter, make it a 4/4. And they're gonna do it right away to maybe sack the Interlacer to draw 2 cards, and maybe hit a land drop, as well as getting to transform Tamio, although they should have attacked first to make an extra clue token. Opponent's playing white as well, plays another Interlacer. Okay, so stick to the plan, Hardened Scales. And then there's a non-zero chance I could set something up with Inkmoth and Ravager next turn. No attacks, unfortunately. So mostly hoping to dodge more flying creatures. Tamio does shrink down our attackers by 1. And Portable Hole sadly can exile something. Down goes the Hanger back, which was our main source of artifacts to set up Ravager. And our opponent also had a flyer. So yeah, this is not going well, sadly. So the fact that they're splashing white means they're probably not playing the new red artifacts, and it's just blue-white. And then Portable Hole being the main payoff. Cannoneer, so opponent did tap out of their flyers here. But I don't think I'll have enough for lethal with my Inkmoth Nexus. Don't even have too many artifact lanes. So yeah, what's the best I can do? Animate Inkmoth, play Ravager, enters with 2 counters. Can sack Citadel, 3/4, Automaton, 5/6. Sack the Ravager, putting 7 counters on Inkmoth. And then with a -1 that would only be 7 poison. So it's not quite enough, but it's close. So I think we just hope they once again tap their flyers and we get to sneak in a win with Inkmoth. And then Patchwork can go after Tamio. And they're gonna let her go. Ornithopter. We'll see if they immediately sack it to make a 4/4. Esper Sentinel's fine. Opponent just looking to sack the Interlacer here to draw more cards. And a backup Tamio, although if they sack Interlacer, that would transform. So that's 1 fewer flying blocker. But yeah, I don't think our opponent's going to be tapping the Ornithopter or sacking it. At least not anytime soon. Emery can get back more Portable Holes or Interlacers. And more Tamios. Alright, so all the possible flyers. And then next turn Cannoneer should have lethal. But yeah. If they didn't have those extra flyers, Inkmoth would certainly present lethal here. And another Inkmoth is not going to make a difference. So is there anything I can come up with? I guess just animate an Inkmoth attack and see what happens. I don't think I can deal 20 normal damage, but we're guaranteed to die to the Cannoneer next turn, so I have to make something happen. And yeah, opponent's definitely blocking the Inkmoth. Everyone's getting blocked. Modular onto the Inkmoth. Sank the automaton. Damage happens. Opponent can sack Ornithopter to the Foundry, make another 4/4. And no poison damage is dealt. Ah, GG's. Opponent's getting back Ornithopter, so that's a forever blocker here that we're not going to get past. Unless we somehow attacked with multiple Inkmoth Nexi. But Cannoneer can do the honors. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing a Lurrus, most likely an Aura deck. This hand has a Scales, but is a little underwhelming besides that, so don't think this is good enough. Alright, this could work. And then 2 lands could suffice. Could keep the Spire for Zabaz, but since we have Ravager, that's probably not going to be necessary. And then if our opponent is on Auras, Inkmoth can be one of our better finishers. Still hoping to start with Steel Overseer. And then next turn we could do some damage. Probably could have played Ornithopter now to maybe get in for one. Reason to hold it is for the other 2-drop, the Automaton. Opponent moving in on the Esper Sentinel, that's fine. I guess Inkmoth isn't attacking this turn, but I can animate it to potentially move some counters onto it. And then yeah, next turn I could already have lethal. Another Ethereal Armor. 2 cards left. Hushbringer, that is a flyer, so that is actually pretty relevant. And creatures dying don't cause abilities to trigger. I believe also applies to modular. Alright, that's a setback. But what I can do is still sacrifice stuff. Can play another Ravager. And activate Inkmoth. So then I just gotta pump it up with Steel Overseer, basically. Since I wouldn't be able to move counters with Ravager. But maybe they don't realize that Hushbringer is actually stopping the Ravager. So pretty happy with that jump. And then I'll still activate Overseer while Inkmoth is activated. So now without Hushbringer, we certainly have lethal with Inkmoth next turn. Another armor. Maybe they can give it flying, I guess we are in trouble. Just a land. Okay, so now I like my chances. We even get to benefit from Zabaz and the extra modular counters. And yeah, opponent's gonna scoop it up next turn, move on to the Ink Moth, and attack for lethal. So yeah, Arcbound Ravager was a pretty messed up card 20 years ago. It's still pretty messed up today, and I think this is the best Arcbound Ravager deck you can be playing right now, at least in Historic. That being said, it still feels like the deck is missing one or two cards to really push it over the top. Mainly Walking Ballista would be a huge addition to the archetype, giving us some built-in removal and another powerful finisher, and Ancient Stirrings would also make the deck a lot more consistent, helping find Arcbound Ravager when we need it, since at the end of the day, that's still the key card in this deck, and games where we draw Arcbound Ravager are quite different than the ones where we don't. So yeah, those are kind of the main takeaways here. A fun deck, but maybe not quite powerful enough compared to some of the other options in Historic at the moment. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.